The vacancy sign outside the Sunset Motel kept blinking against the rain-streaked glass of room 14, giving the place that tired glow motels get when they've seen too many lonely nights. I sat on the edge of a soft, sagging mattress, watching my little girl, Emma, drag her fingertip across the fogged-up window like she was drawing shapes only she could see. "Mama, why do we always leave before breakfast?" she asked. Her voice was so small, gentle even, like she was afraid of the answer. Emma was only 7, still just a kid, too young to understand real danger, but old enough to feel the shake in my hands every time we packed up and ran. I tried to smile at her, the way I used to, but these days my smile didn't make it all the way to my eyes. "We're adventurers, sweetheart," I told her softly. "Adventurers don't sit still for too long." But the truth was, Emma stopped believing in adventures 3 motels ago. Life had shrunk down to whatever we could squeeze into one beat-up duffel bag. Her old stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppers, leaned against the pillows with that torn-up left ear, kind of like our old life, hanging by threads. I used to be a nurse. A good one. I had friends, a real home with a garden out back, a steady, normal life. Then I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. It happened on a quiet Tuesday night in the hospital storage room. I'd gone in looking for more morphine for a patient who was in agony. Instead, I walked straight into Officer Thomas Daniels stuffing evidence bags into his jacket, bottles of pills, stacks of cash from a drug bust, paperwork that should have been locked up tight at the precinct. We locked eyes under those harsh fluorescent lights, and in that moment, everything tilted. "You didn't see this," he growled at me. But of course I had. And when 2 witnesses in his latest case turned up dead within a week, I understood exactly what that look in his eyes had meant. I'd seen too much. So I grabbed Emma, cleaned out my savings, and slipped into the empty spaces of America. Just another ghost running from a life she never planned to leave. That was 14 weeks ago. Now, as I looked out the window, I saw Emma suddenly go still. "Mama, that car." A dark sedan crawled through the motel parking lot, slow as a hunting cat, its headlights sliding over our door like they were searching for something. My blood went cold. I'd seen that same car 2 towns back, parked outside the diner where we grabbed lunch. "Pack your things. Now." My voice came out tight, but steady. I'd learned how to run without making noise. Emma moved fast, the way kids do when they've had too much practice. She tucked Mr. Hoppers into the bag, gathered her tiny stack of clothes and her one worn-out book. She didn't cry anymore when it was time to go. That was the part that cracked me open inside, my daughter treating fear like it was part of daily life. We climbed out the back window just as footsteps stopped in front of our room. Then came the knock, 3 hard, deliberate raps, right as we slipped into the cold, soaking rain and vanished into the night. We crouched under the awning of a shut-down gas station, rain crashing down on the tin roof above us like a handful of gravel being thrown over and over. Emma trembled beside me, and I pulled her tight against my side, stretching my jacket around both of us even though it barely covered her shoulders. "Mama, what did you do?" she whispered. "Why are they always trying to find us?" Her question hit me right in the chest. How do you explain something as ugly as corruption to a 7-year-old? How do you tell your child that doing the right thing can sometimes put a target on your back? "I saw something bad, baby," I murmured, brushing her wet hair off her forehead. "Something a police officer did, something he knew was wrong. And instead of facing it, he's trying to make sure I can't tell a soul." "But you're good, Mama," she said, her voice shaking. "You help people. I know, sweetheart. I know. But sometimes the world gets flipped upside down. Sometimes bad people wear badges, and good people end up running." What I didn't tell her, what I'd been carrying alone, was hidden inside the lining of our old duffel bag. Photocopies. Evidence. Right before we fled, I broke into the hospital administrator's office and photographed every single paper tied to Daniels, his theft, the altered reports, the bizarre payoffs. At the time, I thought it was insurance. Proof that might save our lives someday. But Daniels was faster. He twisted the story before I ever spoke a word. He painted me as unstable, dangerous, a thief, even a threat to my own daughter. Within days, Cops across 3 states had my picture plastered on bulletin boards. Sheriff's offices were told I'd kidnapped Emma, that she needed to be rescued. The truth got twisted until it felt like a cage around us, and that stack of evidence in my bag turned into something that could either save us or get both of us killed. Just then, through the wall of rain, I saw headlights sliding toward us again. "Run," I breathed. We bolted into the narrow alley behind the station, my fingers locked around Emma's hand. We didn't look back. I could hear car doors slam, the slap of boots on wet pavement, voices chasing us through the dark. "Claire Matthews, stop. We just want to help you." But I knew that voice. Even buried under fake sympathy, Officer Daniels' tone scraped right through me. I yanked Emma harder, her little feet barely touching the ground as I tried to drag us both farther from him. We burst into the parking lot behind Lucky's Diner. Empty, slick, and boxed in. A chain-link fence rose in front of us, tall and soaked. Behind us, white flashlight beams swept the rain like hungry knives. "Mama." Emma's voice cracked, spilling pure fear into the night. Daniel stepped out of the shadows with 2 officers flanking him. He wore a polite, icy smile, the kind a man uses when he thinks he's already won. "Claire," he said calmly, like he was talking to a misbehaving child. "It's over. You're not well. You need help. And Emma needs to be somewhere safe. Stay away from us." I shoved Emma behind me, spreading my arms wide and planting myself between her and the man who had destroyed our lives. My whole body shook, but I wasn't moving. "We're taking the girl into protective custody," Daniels continued. "You can come quietly, or we can do this the hard way." He reached for his cuffs like it was already decided. Emma screamed. And then, out of nowhere, the world rumbled. A sound like distant thunder rolled through the soaked parking lot, deep enough to vibrate the puddles at our feet. The sound hit us first, deep, rolling thunder that didn't come from the sky. Then the headlights appeared, dozens of them, cutting through the rain like a wall of fire-breathing dragons charging into the lot. Motorcycles, big ones, poured in from the street and circled the pavement with a kind of purpose that made the ground vibrate. Engines roared in a wild chorus, and then, almost magically, every single one went silent at the same moment. The riders swung off their bikes. Leather jackets, heavy boots, club patches, rain dripping from thick beards and sleeved arms. They moved like men who'd faced real danger before and weren't impressed by whatever Officer Daniels thought he was bringing. One of them stepped forward, and I swear the man looked carved out of a mountainside. He had to be well over 6 feet, shoulders wide as a doorway, arms like he could carry a truck engine under each one. But when I looked at his face, really looked, I saw something soft in his eyes, something gentle, and that surprised me more than the motorcycles. "Evening, officers," he said, his voice rumbling like gravel rolled in warm honey. "Heard a bit of commotion out here. Everything all right?" Daniel's face turned a shade redder than the diner's neon sign. "Police business. Move along." The big man raised an eyebrow. "See, that's the thing. This lot belongs to Lucky, and Lucky's a friend of mine. So technically, you boys are standing on private property." Then his gaze drifted past Daniels, straight to Emma, still glued to my hip, shaking hard enough to rattle her teeth. Something changed in his expression right then, a kind of protective sadness. "And I'm real particular," he added quietly, "about people scaring little kids on my friend's property." He crouched down slowly, lowering himself until he was eye level with Emma, making himself smaller, less alarming. And for a moment, he pretended the cops behind him didn't even exist. "Hey there, little one," he said softly. "You look pretty scared. Who's been hurting you?" Emma lifted her face, her big eyes shining with tears. Something passed between them, something wordless but strong. She could tell right away he wasn't like the others. He wasn't hunting us. He wasn't lying. "Please," she managed, barely breathing the words. "Please don't let them take my mama." The man rose to his full height again, and whatever gentleness he'd shown melted away. When he looked back at Daniels, his whole presence turned to stone. "I think you boys should get on out of here," he said. Daniels started to argue, but then he looked behind the big man, at the 50 bikers standing shoulder to shoulder behind him like a steel wall, and shut his mouth. "This isn't over," he snapped. The big man didn't blink. "Yeah," he replied, his voice low and steady. "I'm starting to think it's not." Daniels and the other officers backed off, retreating to their car. When their taillights disappeared into the rain, the man finally turned back toward us. "Name's Rex," he said. "Road captain of the Devil's Disciples MC. You two look like you could use something warm to drink and a dry place to sit for a while. No strings attached. No questions. Just a little safety. At least for tonight." I wanted to trust him. God, I wanted to. But after months of running from men, my body felt wired to expect the worst. Why should these men be any different? Then Emma reached out, her tiny hand stretching toward Rex's big, weathered palm like she already knew the answer. Sometimes trust doesn't come from logic. Sometimes it's a desperate leap you take, because if you don't, you'll drown. "Okay," I whispered. My voice shook, but the word felt right. "Okay." The Devil's Disciples Clubhouse sat on the far edge of town, a squat old building that used to be a mechanic's garage back in the day. The moment we stepped inside, I caught the sharp mix of motor oil, leather, and coffee so strong it could have peeled the paint off the walls. Oddly enough, it felt safe. Emma clung to my hand as we walked in, but for the first time in weeks her eyes weren't filled with fear, they were filled with curiosity. The walls were lined with framed photos of men on their bikes, but not the kind of scenes you'd expect from the stories people tell. There were snapshots from charity rides, toy runs for children's hospitals, and even awards for community service sitting inside a glass case. These weren't the monsters people whispered about on TV. They looked more like a rough-edged family. "Maggie," Rex called out toward the bar. "Grab these two some dry clothes and something hot to put in their bellies." The woman he was talking to looked about 50, maybe a little older. Warm eyes, deep laugh lines, the kind of face that made you believe she'd seen everything and still kept her heart open. "On it," she said, disappearing into a back room. Within minutes, Emma and I were swallowed up in oversized sweatshirts that hung to our knees and wrapped our hands around steaming mugs of hot chocolate. The warmth felt like a blessing after so many nights in the cold. Around us, bikers moved carefully, speaking softly, like they were afraid that one loud noise might make us bolt through the nearest exit. Rex settled into a chair across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "You don't have to tell me a thing," he said. "But I've been alive long enough to recognize the look of folks running from something real. Those weren't regular officers doing regular welfare checks." My hands tightened around the mug. "You wouldn't believe me," I whispered. "Try me," he replied. "Most unbelievable things I've heard have turned out to be true." So I told him, not everything, but enough to paint the picture. The hospital, Daniels, the witnesses who disappeared, the running, the fear that had become a constant hum under my skin. While I spoke, Emma curled into my side, finally warm, finally still for the first time in what felt like forever. When I finished, Rex didn't say anything right away. He just watched us, thinking. Then he asked quietly, "The girl, Emma, what's she been eating? When's the last time she slept in a real bed?" The question hit me harder than I expected. "We've been managing," I said. "That's not what I asked," he replied gently but firmly. My eyes burned. 3 days, I admitted. She had McDonald's 3 days ago. Before that, just crackers from a gas station. And she hasn't complained once. Not once. Rex's jaw tightened, and I saw something shift in him. A fierce, protective spark. He looked at Emma like a man seeing an injustice he couldn't walk away from. "You're staying here tonight," he said. "Both of you. The guest room's got clean sheets and a lock on the inside if that helps you feel safer. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." I blinked at him, overwhelmed. "Why are you helping us?" I asked quietly. "You don't even know us." Rex's eyes drifted to Emma, fast asleep on my shoulder, clutching Mr. Hoppers like he was the last piece of her old world she still trusted. "Because somebody has to," he said. And for the first time in 14 weeks, I believed him. Morning sunlight slipped through the clubhouse windows in warm, golden stripes, the kind that makes the world feel gentle again. It was the first peaceful morning Emma had felt in what seemed like forever. I was still half asleep when she stirred beside me, and for once, my face wasn't tense or listening for footsteps. I didn't even realize I'd relaxed until I felt how heavy my breathing had become. Emma eased out of bed quietly, clutching Mr. Hoppers against her chest the way she always did when she needed courage. I drifted for a few more minutes, unaware she'd already wandered out into the main room. Later she told me how she'd found Rex sitting at a big workbench, tools scattered everywhere, a motorcycle carburetor cracked open in front of him. He looked up when her tiny footsteps approached, and the smile he gave her was honest and warm. One of those smiles that reached all the way to a man's eyes. "Morning, kiddo," he said. "Sleep all right?" Emma nodded, shy as always. Then she held up Mr. Hoppers, his arm dangling by a thread. "His arm is broken," she said. "It's been broken for a long time." Rex studied the bunny like he was taking on a serious mission. "Well, we can't have that," he told her. "Every warrior needs to be in fighting shape." He gently cleared a space on the workbench. "Come on, let's see what we can do." For the next hour, she sat there watching this giant, this man built like a human mountain, carefully stitch her stuffed rabbit back together. His hands were strong enough to tear apart an engine block, yet somehow gentle enough to sew tiny seams in worn fabric. And he narrated every step, explaining his surgery, as if Mr. Hoppers were the most important patient he'd ever had. "My dad used to fix things," Emma said after a while, her voice small. Before he left, Rex froze mid-stitch. "That must have hurt," he murmured. "Mama says he wasn't strong enough to stay," she continued. "That sometimes people break and can't be fixed." She looked up at Rex with those old soul eyes of hers. "Are you strong enough?" The question hit him harder than any punch he'd ever taken. I wasn't there to see his face in that moment, but later he told me it felt like the whole world stopped spinning for a second. She wasn't just asking if he was tough. She was asking if he'd leave her too. "Yeah," he said finally, his voice thick with something heavy and real. "Yeah, Emma, I'm strong enough." She leaned into his arm, and he held perfectly still, like the weight of her trust was something fragile and sacred. "Please," she whispered, "please don't let them take my mom. She's all I have." And I think, her voice cracked, "I think she's more scared than me." Hearing that later broke me in a way nothing else had. Rex set down his needle and turned toward her, giving the girl his full, undivided attention. "Listen to me, little one. I don't know all the details yet, but I promise you, nobody's taking your mama. Not while I'm still breathing." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Do you mean it?" "Bikers don't make promises we can't keep," he said softly. "It's against the code." She threw her arms around his neck, tiny and trembling, and Rex held her as if she were made of glass and starlight. He had no idea then what keeping that promise would cost him. None of us did. But in that quiet moment, he knew, without a doubt, he'd pay whatever price it demanded. About 40 miles from the clubhouse, in a cramped conference room inside the county sheriff's station, Officer Daniels jabbed an angry finger at a big map spread across the table. "She's here," he snapped. "Somewhere in this zone. And she's got the girl with her." Sheriff Jim Morrison studied the map, brows pulled tight. I didn't know the man back then, but Rex later told me Morrison was the kind of sheriff who actually believed in the badge he wore. Which is probably why what Daniels was saying didn't sit right with him. "Tom," Morrison said slowly, "I've known you 15 years, and something about this just feels wrong. Why would a nurse kidnap her own daughter?" "Because she's mentally unstable," Daniels replied without missing a beat, his voice as smooth as oiled glass. "She started stealing medication from the hospital. When they confronted her, she broke, grabbed the kid, and vanished. We've got documentation." Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Documentation you provided." Daniel's expression sharpened. "You questioning me, Jim?" "I'm questioning," Morrison said carefully, "why a routine pickup needs this level of manpower, and why you're calling in favors from departments 3 states away, and why you're so personally invested in chasing down a woman who supposedly needs psychiatric help. Shouldn't social services be involved?" Daniels leaned forward, voice dripping with false concern. "Because that child is in danger. Every hour she's with Claire Matthews is another hour Emma could be hurt." It was a lie wrapped in worry, polished from being repeated so many times that Daniels almost believed it himself. The truth was far simpler and far uglier. I'd seen him stealing. I had proof somewhere on me, and he knew it. As long as I was alive and able to speak, his whole life, his job, his reputation, even his freedom, hung by a thread. Emma wasn't his concern. She was leverage. A tool. Collateral he could use to control the narrative. Morrison exhaled heavily. All right, I'll put out an APB. But Tom, if I find out you're not being honest about any of this. You won't, Daniels said, flashing a smile thin enough to cut glass. Come on, Jim. I'm one of the good guys. He left the station before Morrison could answer, stepping into the fading afternoon light. As he crossed the parking lot, he pulled out his phone and dialed a private number, one he kept off departmental records. Yeah, it's me, he said when the line picked up. I need you to dig into something. Biker club on the south side, Devil's Disciples. See if they're holding anyone they shouldn't be. And if they are, I want everything. Every violation, every member, every weak spot. Daniels slid into his car, expression cold. He'd burn their whole clubhouse to ashes if that's what it took. Nobody, absolutely nobody, made Officer Thomas Daniels look like a fool. 3 nights later, Rex found me in the clubhouse kitchen, sitting at the old wooden table with my phone clutched in both hands like it might blow up. My whole body trembled. I couldn't make my fingers stay still. He stepped inside quietly. What's wrong? I looked up at him, feeling the blood drain from my face. It's on the news now, I whispered. They're calling it a kidnapping. They showed my photo. Emma's too. They're saying I'm dangerous, that I'm unstable, that I need medication, that I'm not safe to be around my own daughter. Rex's eyes didn't move. Are you dangerous? No. My voice cracked with the force of it. I'm a nurse, for God's sake. I help people. I've spent my whole career trying to make things better, not tear them down. I swallowed. I just saw something I wasn't supposed to. The cop, Rex said. Daniels, what exactly did you see? The question sat between us like a weight. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked to the guest room, grabbed my duffel bag, and brought it back to the table. My hands dug into the lining, into the hidden seam, and pulled out a manila envelope that had become my last piece of truth. I opened it. Inside were the photographs, documents, and ledger copies I'd taken the night everything fell apart. Proof of stolen evidence, drug bust pills that never made it into official logs, payoffs disguised as donations, forged signatures scattered like confetti. He's been stealing from drug busts for years, I said quietly, selling pills on the side, planting evidence. I found all of this in the storage room the night I walked in on him. I photographed everything before I ran. I thought if I had proof, someone might actually listen. Rex spread the papers out across the table. His face got darker with every page he flipped. This isn't just corruption, he said finally. This is organized crime wearing a badge. If this ever got out, he'd go to prison. I finished. And everyone connected to him would go down too. That's why he's coming after me. Not to save Emma, to shut me up. Rex lifted his eyes. Why didn't you tell me this from the beginning? Because I didn't know if I could trust you. I blurted out. I don't know who he's working with. I didn't know if you'd hand me over for a reward, or because he had you in his pocket too. Rex stood up slowly, his shoulders rising like a storm building behind him. When he spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it hit like steel. Lady, I've ridden with these men for 2 decades. We've pulled kids out of hellish homes. We've kept women safe from stalkers when nobody else would step in. We've buried brothers who died protecting strangers. He leaned closer. You really think we'd turn in a mother who's trying to save her daughter? The shame hit me hard. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry. I just didn't know who to trust anymore. This isn't just trouble anymore, Rex said, gathering the documents gently, almost reverently. This is war. And you brought that war to my door. He paused. Which means it's our war now. Despite everything, despite the fear pressing into my chest, I felt something warm spark inside me. Hope. Real hope. What do we do? I asked. We make sure everyone in this state sees these pictures, he said. We expose him so completely he won't be able to breathe without someone watching. But first, he looked toward the hallway where Emma slept. We keep you and Emma safe. Because Daniels isn't going to stop. And when a cornered rat has nothing left to lose. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The danger hung in the room like smoke, thick and hard to breathe through. That night, Emma woke to the sound of voices drifting through her bedroom door, my voice and Rex's, sharp, urgent whispers slicing through the quiet. I can't put them at risk, I was saying. These men have families. If Daniel shows up here with warrants and a whole squad behind him, we can handle it, Rex whispered back. No, listen to me, I insisted. I'm leaving tonight. I'll draw him away from here. Let him somewhere else. If I go alone, at least Emma will be safe with you until I can. That, Rex said, not even bothering to lower his voice, is the dumbest plan I've ever heard. It's the only plan that keeps your people safe. What I didn't know was that Emma heard all of it. Every word. And to her, my sweet little girl, it didn't sound like strategy or sacrifice. It sounded like abandonment. She lay perfectly still, heart pounding, listening as my footsteps moved down the hall, listening as the back door creaked open and closed behind me with a soft, terrible click. And then she moved. Emma grabbed Mr. Hoppers, shoved her feet into her shoes, and slipped out into the cold night after me. The air was sharp and dark. She saw my silhouette ahead, walking toward the road, my shoulders hunched like the sky itself was pressing down on me. Mama! I spun around, startled. Emma? What are you doing out here? You need to go back inside where it's. No, she cried, sprinting toward me with tears streaming down her face. You can't leave me. You promised we'd stay together. You promised. My heart cracked straight down the middle. Baby, I'm trying to protect you. You're trying to leave me, she sobbed. Everyone leaves. Dad left. Now you're leaving. But I don't care about being safe if you're not with me. The way her little body shook nearly knocked the breath out of my lungs. I dropped to my knees and wrapped her tightly in my arms. I'm not leaving you. I could never leave you. I was going to come back, I swear. Liar, she cried into my shoulder. Adults always lie. And the worst part was, she wasn't wrong. I had been lying. To her, to myself. I told myself walking away would save her, when all it really did was break her heart. I'd been so afraid of Daniel's finding us that I forgot the one thing that mattered most. My daughter needed me more than she needed safety. Behind us, the clubhouse door swung open. Light spilled across the dirt, and Rex stepped out, arms folded over his chest. You done running yet? He called out. Because that kid of yours just taught you something you should have already known. I blinked up at him, confused. She's not scared of Daniel's finding you, Rex said, walking toward us. She's scared of you not being there when he does. He stopped a few feet away. So here's what's happening now. You're both coming inside. We're making a plan, together. And nobody runs alone anymore. Got it? I nodded, my throat too tight for words. Emma clung to me as we stood, her little arms wrapped around my waist like she was holding the world together by sheer will. I won't let them take you, Mama, she whispered fiercely. I won't, even if I have to protect you myself. It was a promise spoken by a child far too young to understand what keeping it might cost. But fate heard her anyway. The attack hit us at dawn. I woke to the sickening crack of splintering wood, followed by boots pounding through the clubhouse and men shouting commands. Emma bolted upright beside me, eyes wide, before I even had the chance to reach for her. This wasn't a welfare check. This wasn't a knock on the door. This was a full-on raid. Fast, aggressive, coordinated like a military unit. Everybody on the ground. Hands where we can see them. Rex and his men hit the floor without resistance. Their faces tight with fury they were forcing themselves to swallow. I knew instantly what was happening. This was Daniel's plan. Flood the place with overwhelming force, snatch me and Emma in the chaos, and deal with the fallout later. I yanked Emma close, wrapping my arms around her as officers swarmed every corner of the clubhouse. And then Daniel stepped inside, flanked by uniforms, his expression lit with cold triumph. Claire Matthews. Emma Matthews, he said, savoring every word. You're both coming with me. The hell they are, Rex growled from the floor. Daniels barely spared him a glance. You're in no position to negotiate, biker. Harboring a fugitive is a felony. Right now, I'm doing you a favor by only taking the woman and the child. Rex lifted his chin. On what charges? Daniel smiled. A thin, poisonous thing. Kidnapping. Child endangerment. Mandatory mental health hold. Take your pick. I knew then that fighting him head-on would only get people hurt. So I stood up slowly, hands raised. Okay, I whispered. Okay, I'll come. Just, please don't hurt Emma. She hasn't done anything wrong. Mama, no. Emma's voice cracked. It's all right, baby. I kept my voice steady, even though I was shaking inside. Go to Rex. He'll take care of you. No. Emma screamed, the sound ripping through the room like something alive. You can't leave me. I won't let you. Daniel stepped forward and reached for my arm. And Emma moved. My little girl, 7 years old, small enough to still curl into my lap, jumped between us, arms flung wide, her tiny body forming a barrier I never could have imagined she'd be brave enough to make. Don't touch her, she screamed. Don't you dare touch my mama. The entire room froze. 50 bikers, a dozen armed officers, all silent. Because there, in the middle of the chaos, stood a little girl who looked ready to fight the whole world. Save my mother, she cried, voice breaking. Please, somebody save my mother. He's a bad man. He's a liar. And I won't let him hurt her. Daniel's expression twisted with rage. Get this kid out of my way. One of the officers stepped forward. Rex surged to his feet, fury exploding across his face. Touch that child and I'll. But the officer didn't stop. He shoved Emma aside. She hit the floor with a hard thud, a sharp cry bursting from her lips. And in that moment, that single, unforgivable moment, everything changed. Emma pushed herself up from the floor, clutching her shoulder where she'd landed hard. I could see the pain in her face, but she didn't care, not even a little. Her tears blurred everything, but her voice was steady, strong. It carried through the room like a lightning bolt. You're a bad man, she shouted at Daniels, her little hand trembling as she pointed straight at him. My mama said you steal. You hurt people. And everyone believes you just because you have a badge, but a badge doesn't make you good. Her voice cracked, but her courage didn't. My mama's good. She helps people, and I won't let you take her. Emma, stop. I begged, reaching for her, terrified of what Daniels might do. But she shook me off, planting her feet like a tiny warrior standing her ground. No, I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being scared, she cried, turning toward the circle of officers. Her small face was fierce, fiercer than I'd ever seen it. He's making you chase us because he's afraid. He's afraid my mama will tell everyone what he did. But I'm not afraid of him anymore. Daniels grabbed my arm roughly and yanked me toward the door. The force of it stole my breath. Emma didn't hesitate. She didn't pause. She didn't think. She moved. She lunged forward, throwing her arms around my waist, locking herself to me with every ounce of strength she had in her tiny body. You can't have her, she screamed. You can't. If you take my mama, you have to take me too. Because I'm never letting go. Daniel snarled. Kid, I'm warning you. But Emma only screamed louder, pouring her whole soul into the cry. Save my mother. Her voice echoed off the walls, shaking the air. Somebody please save my mother. And then, through the shattered doorway, carried by the pale light of early morning, came a sound so massive it felt like the sky itself was cracking open. Motorcycles. Dozens. No, hundreds. A thunderous roar that rolled across the parking lot and straight into the bones of every man in that room. It sounded like the end of the world. And for Officer Thomas Daniels, it was. The sound outside grew so loud it rattled the walls, the windows, even the floor under our feet. It was like the whole world was shaking itself awake. Headlights flared through the blinds, bright, blinding, and I realized it wasn't just the devil's disciples pulling in. It was everybody. The Iron Brotherhood, the Road Warriors, the Nomads, and even the Hells Angels themselves. Biker clubs from 3 states out had shown up. Word had spread fast. A biker clubhouse was under attack. A mother and her daughter were in danger. A child had cried for help. And when bikers hear that kind of call, they don't debate it. They don't hesitate. They ride. The motorcycles packed into the lot until the entire building felt surrounded. Engines stayed running, forming a roaring wall of chrome, thunder, and raw defiance. Rex rose slowly to his feet, and this time, not a single officer tried to put him back down. "You called for backup," he said to Daniels, his tone casual, almost friendly. "So did I." Then more bikers stepped through the broken doorway. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They just walked inside with the calm, steady confidence of men who already knew the outcome. Leather jackets outnumbered uniforms in seconds. A man pushed forward through the crowd, older, authoritative, his gray beard braided tight. His leather jacket carried the unmistakable winged skull of the Hells Angels. When he spoke, his voice wasn't loud, but it rolled through the room like a judge delivering a verdict. "Officer Daniels," he said. "Name's Marcus Cole. Sergeant-at-Arms, Hells Angels. Retired Marine. Tax-paying citizen. And somebody who doesn't take kindly to watching a grown man shove a little girl around." Daniels blanched. "This is police business. This." Marcus swept his hand toward the officers. "This is theater, son. Now tell me, how many real warrants you got? Signed by a judge. With probable cause. Because I'd bet good money the district attorney doesn't know a thing about this morning's little field trip." "The woman is mentally unstable," Daniels barked. "Great," Marcus said. "Then show me the psychiatric evaluation order. Where's the social worker? Where's any of the legal procedure required before you rip a child out of her mother's arms?" He took a step closer. "Or did you skip all that because this isn't about protecting a child? This is about you silencing somebody who saw too much?" Daniel's voice shook. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Actually," Rex lifted his phone. "We've got a pretty good idea." On the screen was a live stream. Everything from the moment the officers stormed the clubhouse to the moment Emma threw herself between us. Every shove, every scream, every abuse of power was now being watched by thousands online. "Funny thing about living in the modern age," Rex said. "Everybody's got a camera. And people love a story about a little girl standing up to corruption." Daniels lunged for the phone. 3 bikers stepped between them, not touching him, not even glaring. They just stood there, solid as walls. "Let her go." Marcus' voice dropped into something deep and dangerous. "Because in about 30 seconds, real federal agents are going to show up. Not the ones you've been leaning on. The ones who saw those evidence logs Claire photographed. Logs that show years of theft right out of your own precinct. You can't prove." "She already did," Rex cut in. "Copies of everything went to the FBI, the state attorney general, and 3 major newspapers 20 minutes ago." Rex didn't smile often, but he smiled then. A slow, grim thing. "You're finished, Daniels," he said. "The only question left is whether you go down swinging or walk out with whatever dignity you've got left." The standoff held for what felt like forever, though it couldn't have been more than 10 seconds. Daniel's hand hovered near his holster, twitching with rage and panic. The bikers stayed loose, almost casual, but I could feel the tension rolling off them. Meanwhile, the other officers shifted uncomfortably, glancing between Daniels and the rows of stony-faced men in leather. It was finally sinking in. They'd been dragged into a mess they didn't understand, used as pawns in a game that had nothing to do with justice. Then, outside, a new sound tore through the air. Federal sirens. The real kind. Daniels dropped my arm like it had burned him. "This isn't over," he hissed, still clinging to me. Emma lifted her chin and said softly but firmly, "Yeah, it is." Federal agents entered the clubhouse with calm efficiency, the kind of confidence that only comes when they've already read the evidence and made up their minds. They moved straight to Daniels, reading him his rights while cameras flashed from the doorway. The live stream was still rolling, and now news crews were here too, drawn by the sight of hundreds of bikers forming a steel-ringed fortress around a corrupt cop. One of the federal agents, a woman with warm, steady eyes, knelt in front of Emma. "You're very brave, sweetheart," she told her. "Your mom's going to need to answer some questions, but I promise you, nobody is taking you away from her. Okay?" Emma nodded, though I could see how drained she was. The adrenaline had burned right out of her. Daniels was dragged past us in cuffs. He shot me one last hateful glare. But something in me had changed, something big. I wasn't scared anymore. I'd spent months running from a man who seemed untouchable, shielded by power and lies. But power crumbles fast when truth shows up. And truth means nothing unless someone is brave enough to speak it, even if that someone is a biker or a 7-year-old child. The agent stood and addressed the room. "Mrs. Matthews, you're not under arrest," she said. "However, we will need you to come to our field office and give a full statement. We've reviewed the materials you submitted. If everything holds up, and early review suggests it will, you and your daughter may qualify for witness protection." No, I surprised even myself with how steady my voice sounded. No more running. No more hiding. My daughter deserves a real life. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Out in the open. Marcus, gray beard, quiet authority, a man who looked carved from stone, nodded in approval. "That's the spirit," he said. "And for what it's worth, you've got a few hundred bikers willing to be character witnesses. We tend to be persuasive." One of the younger officers stepped forward, shame written all over his face. "Ma'am," he said hesitantly, I'm sorry. We were told you were dangerous, that the girl was in danger. If I'd known." "You were doing your job," I said softly. "He's very good at lying." The officer looked at Emma, who was still pressed against me with Mr. Hoppers squished between us. "For what it's worth," he said, voice cracking just a little, "your daughter is the bravest person I've ever seen." 3 weeks later, the Devil's Disciples clubhouse was packed again, but this time for something beautiful. Emma's 8th birthday. Balloons hung from the rafters, streamers draped across the old garage beams, and the whole place buzzed with the laughter of neighborhood kids who couldn't believe they were having a birthday party in a biker clubhouse. The smell of cake, chili, and leather mixed together in a way that somehow felt like home. I stood by the window, watching my daughter proudly show her friends how to sit on Rex's motorcycle like it was some kind of throne. Mr. Hoppers, the newly repaired version, sat up on the handlebars wearing the tiniest leather vest Maggie had stitched for him. His little stuffed chest puffed out like he was an honorary member. "She's going to want her own bike by the time she hits 16, Marcus said, stepping up beside me with 2 cups of coffee. I actually laughed. A real, full laugh I hadn't felt in months. After what she's been through, a motorcycle sounds like the least dangerous thing she could ask for. The investigation had moved fast once the feds got involved. Daniel's whole operation came apart like a cheap sweater. Dirty cops, stolen evidence, tampered reports. Everything he'd built collapsed under the weight of its own corruption. My testimony ended up being the piece that pulled the whole thing down. They offered me witness protection. I turned it down. Instead, I took a job at the county hospital, close enough to Emma's new school that sometimes we could sneak in lunches together. We found a small apartment, nothing fancy, but ours. Emma planted tomatoes in the backyard, and every day she'd run outside to see if any new ones had shown up. And every Sunday, without fail, we came to the clubhouse for family dinner. Because that's what these people had become. Family. Rex walked over then, Emma riding high on his shoulders, shrieking with laughter as he pretended to stumble under her great weight. "Birthday girl says it's cake time," he announced. "Birthday girl should probably eat something real first," I said, but I was smiling too hard to mean it. Rex set Emma down gently. She hugged me, then turned and hugged him too, a little ritual she'd created so no one ever felt left out. When it came time for candles, Claire leaned in. "Make a wish, sweetheart." Emma blew out the candles in one breath and shrugged. "Nope, don't need to. I already got everything I wished for." Later, when the sugar-soaked kids finally headed home and the clubhouse quieted down, Emma curled up between Rex and me in one of the old leather chairs, fighting sleep with heavy eyes. "Mama," she murmured. "Yeah, baby. I'm glad we stopped running." My throat tightened. "Me too, sweetheart." She turned her head a little. "And Rex?" "Yeah, kiddo." He answered softly. "Thank you for being strong enough to stay." Rex took her tiny hand in his and squeezed it gently. "Always, little one," he said. "That's a promise." Outside, the sun melted into the horizon, shading the sky with amber and gold. The motorcycles in the parking lot gleamed in the fading light, not as symbols of fear or rebellion, but as shields, as belonging, as proof that strangers can become protectors when the world gets dark. I looked at my daughter, truly safe now, free to be a child again. And I looked at the people around us, the ones who had stepped up when they didn't have to, the ones who chose to fight for what was right simply because it was right. And in that quiet moment, I remembered something I'd forgotten during those months of running. Evil might hold power, but good has people willing to stand up for it. One small, brave girl at a time.